Parashat Toldot, Isaac becomes blind and old, and he gets close to his death, and he wanted to bless his sons, his oldest son. And as we know, that the righteous people, they have a very strong power of blessings, and in addition, if they curse someone, it's more likely to come true. And that's because of how close they are to God. Also, God spoke with them and blessed these God-fearing men who in turn have the power to bless others. Jacob preceded Esau and got the blessing before his brother. He goes to Isaac, pretends to be Esau, and Jacob and is blessed. It says in Genesis 27:28, the blessing he received is the following: and may God give you of the dew of the heavens and of the fatness of the earth, and abundance, grain and wine. Esau, his brother, who was supposed to get the blessing, comes later on and says, Dad, what about me? Is there any blessing left for me? Isaac says to him, behold, of the fatness of the earth shall be your dwelling, and of the dew of the heavens from above. Genesis 27:39. Now, if you look at these verses, they look identical. But if you pay close attention, there's something vastly different. The Ramban, the commentator, says, first of all, there's no conflict for God to bless the land of two nations, because God's natural blessing is abundant for both of them. Furthermore, as we will see, Jacob is the heir of Abraham, so the blessing will be realized in the land of Israel, and Esau's blessing will be realized in another land. So now, given that, so what's the difference between the blessings? The difference is that in the blessing that was given to Jacob, the word God is mentioned. And the blessing given to Esau, the word God is not mentioned. Meaning that Jacob will get a blessing in a supernatural way, with God being involved. And Esau will get his blessing on his lands in a more natural manner. And we'll see what the blessings are soon. There is an interdependency between the people of Israel and their land. As long as the Jews are in the land of Israel, it is a land flowing with milk and honey. However, when the Jews must leave the land or are expelled from the land of Israel, it will be a land inhospitable to all other nations who try to reside there. You cannot scientifically explain how a plot of land could grow and flourish for one nation, for one particular people, to the exclusion of others. The Torah explains in Deuteronomy 8, verses 7 through 10. God will bring you to a good land, a land with flowing streams and springs gushing out in the valley and the mountains, and you will not lack anything. And when you eat, you will be satisfied. You shall bless God for the good that He is giving you. But in Leviticus 26, 32 and 33, it says, what happens when we're exiled? It says, I will devastate the land, and your enemies who dwell in it. It will be desolate, your city in ruins. Another verse, all its soil will be nothing but sulfur and salt, a burnt out and devastated land, unsown and unfruitful. It won't even grow any grass. That's Deuteronomy 29:22. So during the 2,000 years that the Jewish people were exiled from their land, numerous nations tried to conquer the land of Israel, and all of them left. They couldn't grow crops. It was desolate. Exactly as predicted in the verses. I will paraphrase what Mark Twain wrote when he visited the land of Israel in 1867. I want to quote exactly what he said. We traverse some miles of desolate country, whose soil is rich enough, but is given wholly to weeds. A silent mournful expanse, a desolation is here that not even imagination can grace. Jerusalem is mournful, dreary, and lifeless. I would not desire to live here. Israel sits in sackcloth and ashes. Over it broods the spell of a curse that has withered its fields and fettered its energies. And why should it be otherwise? Can the curse of a deity beautify a land. It is no more of the work of the world. It is sacred to poetry and tradition. It is a dreamland. That's what he wrote when he visited. And let's look at what it says in Deuteronomy 30, verses 3 to 5. And God will return your captured ones. He will have compassion on you, and he will gather you in from all the nations that God scattered you there. In Ezekiel 36:8, and you, O mountains of Israel, you shall shoot forth your branches, and shall bear your fruit to my nation Israel, because their return is close at hand. And I'll return you there as in former times, and I will make you even more bountiful than it used to be, and you'll know that I am God. We see that when the Jewish people came back to Israel in 1948, the land blossomed like never before. Everything grew. And how could it be that the land responds only to some people, not to others? 2,000 years, nothing. You couldn't live there. It was very hard. Now I'll explain how we can see from the Torah explicitly that the land of Israel was given to Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob, which is the Jewish people, and not to any other of Abraham or Isaac's sons, and not to any other nation, not to the Muslims, not to the Christians, who have no claim to the land, even according to their own scriptures. So, firstly, it says in Genesis 17, God tells Abraham, I will establish my covenant between you and your descendants after you, throughout their generations, an eternal covenant to be to you a God and to all your children after you. Also, the land of Canaan, known as Israel, is also given to Abraham. It says, and I'll give to you and your offsprings after you the land of your sojourns, the whole land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I shall be a God to them. So far, God has only set a covenant with Abraham, and he was given the land of Canaan, which is the land of Israel. Now, who was alive at that time? Ishmael, his first son, who is the ancestor of the Muslims. By using the word in a verse, after you, descendants after you, it means only the children that would descend from him in the future. So therefore, Ishmael, who was already living, cannot be the subject of this verse. And that was his other son, Isaac, that the verse was speaking about. But if that's not enough for you, I'll bring you another verse, that the covenant was only passed on to Isaac and his descendants. The verse says in Genesis 21:12, literally, through Isaac your descendants will be called. This, of course, excluded Ishmael from the blessing of eternity. Isaac in turn passed the blessing on to Jacob, to the exclusion of Esau, his brother. It says in Genesis 28, verses 3 and 4, Isaac blesses Jacob. May he grant you the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may possess the land of your sojourns, which God gave to Abraham. This comes to exclude Esau, the father of the Christians. And even more clearly, God tells Jacob in Genesis 28:13, and behold, God was standing over him, and he said, I am Hashem, God of Abraham, your father, and God of Isaac. The ground upon which you are lying, to you will I give it, and to your descendants. No mention of Ishmael, no mention of Esau. They have already been excluded, as you see from the verses. So now, we already see the Torah proves that it was given to Jacob and his descendants, the 12 tribes, and that's where we, the Jewish people, are from. But we have the Quran that the Muslims follow, and they say they have a holy war against the Jews. Can they prove that the Torah was substituted for the Quran? That the Quran was substituted for the Torah? The opposite. Is the Quran in place of the Torah, yes or no? So let's see. Muhammad was born in 570 AD, and he started Islam, and he lived with many Jews. They had a lot of contact with Jews. He learned about Judaism. The Muslims at the time were already keeping some of the Jewish practices, such as dietary laws, belief in one God, the concept of repentance, the concept of charity. And in the Quran, the biblical figures such as Abraham, Noah, they're mentioned 130 times. Joseph, Moses. Moses himself was mentioned 130 times, but all these other figures were also mentioned. Now let's look at the contradictions of the Quran. Basically, we see that Muhammad originally wrote the Quran as an extension to the Torah. It clearly says in the Quran, this is the wording, before this book, there was Moses' book. And this book confirms what came before us. You could see that in Surah, chapter 2, verse 41, verses 48 to 51, 53, 87, and chapters 3, verse 3. So Muhammad writes this in the Quran with the hope that by giving serious recognition to the Jewish people, that they would accept him as the final prophet. Now, let's see. You're telling me the Torah was once true. But now you're bringing something to replace it. So if you believe Muhammad and everything the Torah said, but now that it's been changed, God changed his mind, so to say. So you must have missed the 23 times that it says in the Torah. It says this is an eternal law for all generations. That's the verse. It's 23 times mentioned. And the 24th time, it says God will never nullify the plan handed over to Israel. As the verse says, to us and our children forever. So if that is said in the Torah that you originally accepted, then you see there's a clause here that can never be changed. That goes for the Christians also, who tried to make the New Testament. If you believe in the what you call the Old Testament, which is the only testament, how can you ignore these verses? Some other contradictions in the Quran. In the Quran, there are serious blunders regarding certain events in the Torah. The Quran mentions Pharaoh, Haman, and the creation of the Tower of Babel all in one period. These were historically thousands of years apart, all of these events. You see that in Surah 28:38. He also writes that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was the same Miriam that was a sister of Aaron and Moses, and that Amram was Mary's father. In reality, Amram was the father of Miriam, and which is the sister of Moses. So, and see in Surah 19:28 and 66:12. So you have two people. You have Mary, who is the mother of Jesus, and you have Miriam, the prophetess, sister of Moses, daughter of Amram, and he mixes them up. Miriam lived 1,000 years before Mary and Jesus. Mary did not live in the time of Egyptian bondage of the Jews and the splitting of the sea. Because if Mary lived in that time, then Jesus also did it, which is not even true at all. No one accepts that, but the Quran does. Miriam was born in 1400 BC, and Mary, mother of Jesus, was born in 20 BC. So how can the Quran say that the mother of Jesus is Moses and Aaron's sister if Moses and Aaron lived 1,000 years before Jesus was even born? If the Torah makes even one mistake, we would bury it, we would put it away. And we see here that the Quran has hundreds of mistakes such as these. Now, the Arabs claim, and despite all this evidence that I just presented, they claim that the land of Israel belongs to them. They have created a false nation called Palestinians, which is no such thing as that. How did they're Arabs. And I asked them the following questions. What you call Palestine, when was it founded and by whom? What were the borders of the nation of Palestine? Where is the map of the nation of Palestine? Who is the head of the government of Palestine and who preceded him? What and where is the capital of Palestine? What year was Palestine an autonomous country? What was its form of government? What were its major cities? What was the basis of its economy? Who was the Palestinian leader before Yasser Arafat? Was Palestine ever recognized by a country whose existence at the time or now leaves no room for interpretation? What was its currency? What was the exchange rate of the Palestinian monetary unit against the US dollar or the German mark or Japanese yen on any particular date. And if this country does not exist today, what happened? What was the historical event that it was caused its demise, and when did that occur? They cannot answer any of these questions, and I will leave it with that.